Hello, welcome back to my channel, Biblical Validity. And today we carry on with the 6 days of creation, which I'm finding very interesting to get into. I got to tell you, this is day three today, where God separates the land from the water and creates plant life. And it's again this amazing part of creation, and so there's a lot to talk about. The the most people don't put any stock in that. They don't believe the biblical view. Even I don't know if I can say most Christians don't believe it, but many Christians, I would think, do not believe the book of Genesis, at least as far as it comes to the creation. Because we're all taught, and I believe this for most of my life, that the universe, started about 14 billion years ago, almost 14 billion years ago, and that um, that life arose over long periods of time. Um, and but not in 6 days, 6,000 years ago, which sounds kind of nutty to a lot of people, and they criticize it. And people tend to criticize things they don't understand, and I've been guilty of that myself. And so I'm giving kind of an overview of this, of how this all fell into sequence. Now, the this the whole issue of creation, the whole issue of the beginning of the universe, falls under the category of historical science. It does not fall in the category of experimental, observational science. It is historical science. Now, historical science are theories that try to explain what happened so far in the past that no one could have observed it. Now, when possible, they base it upon as much evidence, and which is what I'm doing here. Um, the creation of the universe is historical science to all of us, even Christians, Bible believers, because none of us were here to watch it happen. All we have on the Christian and Judeo-Christian side is the book of Genesis, and what everybody else has is what they teach in all the schools. They've been, doing this for over 200 years, trying to create a man-made understanding of the universe. And I can understand the lure of that because yeah, if you're a scientist, you want to be known for making great discoveries. And so there's a lot of incentive in that world to create ideas and things that we can try to explain through these theories through scientific laws and whatever evidence can be observed. I can see that. On the other side, God gets all the credit. Okay, and it's not a man-made. At least in our view of a Christian view, it's not a man-made understanding. It's the understanding of God, and we're just trying to get it. All right, did that make sense? I hope so. Okay, all right. Um, anyway, the day three of creation. Okay, so what happened on day three? And again, I want you to see how from the biblical viewpoint, that how God put all this creation together in a very logical sequence. And let me just, for example, let me ask you a question. What came first, animals or plants? Okay, if you think about it, you might, I think I know the answer. Okay, I'll answer it later on if you're not quite sure. What came first, plants or animals? And just totally disregarding what Genesis says. All right, what would they? Someone who believes in the man-made science of evolution, long ages, um, how would they answer that question? What came first, animals or plants? Good question. Okay, now would someone, an old man, 3,400 years ago, roughly, called Moses, who is believed to have written the first five books of the Bible, including, of course, Genesis. Would he have understood all this stuff that we're talking about, all this science? Of course not. Of course not. There were no scientists in those days who understood hardly any science. None of them understood much science. And so it's amazing that I think this points to right there, there's a lot of validity in the Bible because just the sequence and what God had to do in order to get this ball rolling here of creation. For example, day one, let there be light. Let there be light is necessary. Light is necessary. What supports life is necessary to support all the chemicals, all the elements, all the chemical interactions. everything else to do with matter. You need all that in order to have light. And so it was more than just God snaps his fingers and says, hey, let there be light out there. All right. No, it was very much more involved and deep than that. The Bible is not a science book, and obviously not a science book. It's very sparse in details. You know, it doesn't tell us where the viruses and the bacteria come from. Um, doesn't mention the insects. You know, it leaves out a lot of details, and so and we you know if we fill in the blanks, we're kind of guessing at it, and but you know obviously the blanks had to be filled in. So we just do our best with what God gave us. The purpose of the Bible is far different than giving us the story of creation and mentioning some great credible miracles. It's really about building the model of salvation through our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ in the end. And that's really what the Bible is deeply about. Okay, so day three. What happened on day three? First of all, he started with the separation of land and water. Day three of creation is divided into two major events. First, he lets dry land appear by gathering the waters into one place. So here's how it reads. Now, I've been going on the Bible Gateway website and just using the New International Version, I believe. It's the NIV version. I'm not very good at all those different translations, knowing the differences, anything like that. I kind of have a sentimental favorite in the King James Bible, the original version from 1611 for various reasons. However, it's hard to read because the language is old for us in these times. All right, so anyway, let's see what the NIV reads. And God said, let the water under the sky be gathered into one place, and let dry ground appear. And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. So, except for day two, for some reason, Genesis doesn't mention that God said it was good. Every day he mentions things were good, and on the very last day after he creates man, he says it was very good. And so, when God says it's good, you know, it implies that you know God is perfect. It means He didn't screw up anything. All right, in this initial creation. All right, so now this isn't all of what happened on day three, but it's a major part of it. So this is the separation of land and water. Now, the words of this passage point to only one landmass, one big piece of real estate, and with waters all around it. Okay, so one big landmass surrounded by the seas, by all the waters. Is that possible? Well, it's kind of hard to argue against because when you look at a map of the world, it's kind of easy to see there was once one large piece of land since the continents appear as if they could fit together like a puzzle. All right, now it's not exactly a puzzle fit, but it's pretty close. Pretty close. You look at how you know, how the western or left side of Africa can fit in where the Caribbean Sea is between North and South America, and you go on from there. You can kind of believe that you know this even from a secular viewpoint kind of makes some sense that it all got broken up. And so I think that's one thing that probably both sides of the issue could kind of agree on, that maybe we did start with just one big mass of land. And I don't have it mentioned in these slides, but that meant the land had to be created so that it was of higher elevation than the water. Were there mountains? I don't know. It doesn't say. How high above the water? No idea. Um, there you go. So, but here it is. He started somewhere, and he created land and water. Okay, now the mainstream secular science explains that the original landmass was divided by tectonic activity over several billions of years in various stages, and that would include volcanic eruptions. There's this ring of fire that surrounds the Pacific Ocean that's out there. Very interesting things. And definitely we know all about tectonic activity through earthquakes. So can't argue against you know the existence of tectonic activity. It's obviously there. But they say it took over several billions of years and at various stages, and it's still ongoing, of course. The continents are still moving very slowly. It might be an inch or two a year, but they're still moving very slowly. I wonder what is keeping those continents moving. I have no idea. I don't argue that they observed that. We'll say North America moved 2 inches last year, for example. Okay, all right. I'm sure that's probably true. I don't know what keeps it moving, but But apparently, this created all the landforms that we see on Earth for the most part. The big mountains and the lakes and streams and canyons and all that great stuff. Now, continuing on my slide, admittedly, this is a reasonable sounding theory. Yeah, it is reasonable sounding, but is historic science since no one observed it. Okay, it doesn't mean it's false just because no one observed it. All right, it's a theory. It's a theory, but it's an unproven theory. All right, um, and you look for evidence to support your theory. All right. The So the best place for me to thoroughly address this is in the future series on Noah's flood. Oh boy, probably the one thing about the entire Old Testament that gets the scientists riled up is the idea of Noah's flood. Oh no, no, this was local floods all over the world, and they'll go on and on. I'll be here all day if I start talking about Noah's flood. The evidence is, I tell you what, it takes a lot more faith to believe there was no Noah's flood than to believe that there was a worldwide catastrophic flood. But I'll give you a very short preview of some evidence. Um, However, countless numbers of fossils of ocean-dwelling creatures are found on most mountain ranges, including the highest, the Himalayas, even Mount Everest. Yeah, they have shells in great abundance, even up on Mount Everest. Shells are, land animals. And by the way, something I didn't mention in this slide, all these shells, and I think they might be called brachiopods. I don't know, I used to know a little bit about fossils because I've collected them locally up here. But uh, they're all shut. Okay, when you found a fossil of a shell, it's shut. It's not open. Now, I go to the beach. I grew up near a beach down in Florida. I just went there 2 or 3 weeks ago, and love the beach. Shells everywhere. All of them are open. Okay, so when a mollusk or a clam or whatever you call them dies, the muscles relax. It opens up. Little critters get in there and eat the dead animal, and that's what you see. You don't find closed shut shells, and they're always open. So in order for all those fossils to be closed, that means they died extremely quickly in a catastrophic event by being covered by sand. Okay, most likely. And all right, so all this is in addition to many layers of sedimentary rock which never eroded in the supposedly millions of years of geologic activity. And they're a part of what points to a worldwide catastrophic flood, which is a viable counter theory to which secular science dismisses out of hand. Okay, they do. They just won't even go there. Don't even want to go there. Okay. All right, so let's do that another day. Boy, I take on Noah's flood. Yeah, it's gonna be another video series, and honestly, I need to gather more evidence and gather my info so I can really hopefully do a good job outlining that. There are a lot of great videos out there on everything I'm talking about, and including Noah's flood. There's real geologists, PhD geologists who talk about Noah's flood, and they are young Earth creationists, and they present the evidence. So don't let me slow you down. Okay, look this stuff up if you want to. You'll find videos in much greater detail, better than I could even possibly think about doing. All I'm doing is giving kind of a broad overview, and I encourage you always to look forward, look on, and look at what other people are showing you out there. Answers in Genesis is one great site that has lots of videos. Creation Ministries International, I think that's an organization. I need to write these things down and put them in my videos so I can kind of direct you to some of these great sources of information. Okay, so all right, so we got the land and the water separated. All right, so now what? Okay, now there is land to support it. God creates plant life. Okay, let's go with the plants. And so here's the rest of the day 3 scripture out of Genesis, starting with verse 11. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants, and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. Kind of repeats himself there, and you see that in the Old Testament places. I'm sure a theologian can tell you the reason for that. I'm not that good yet. I don't know if I'll ever be. Um, and God saw that it was good. All right. And then there was evening and there was morning, the third day. All right, there we go. So there's the third day of creation. Oh, he created plant life. Wow. A lot to it. And by the way, I didn't mention that if you're wondering where I am. I'm coming to you today from St. Petersburg, Florida, near the St. Pete Chess Club, under the big banyan tree down there. And of course, you don't see anything moving in the background. It's just a picture. Is my background. Um, my misspent youth, I played a lot of chess. A friend of mine and I are creating a new form of chess, which is utterly amazing. We've been friends for 49 years, and I don't know, maybe in a year or two we'll try to spring that on the world and see if anybody gets interested in it. But anyway, St. Pete Chess Club is at this old recreational club down in St. Pete. Used to have a lot of shuffleboard courts. I bet they're playing pickleball down there now. And a banyan tree, I got to tell you about banyan trees because I love them. And I've only seen a few because there are only a few, relatively few in the United States. St. Pete has a couple of them, and I think they were all planted around 1925 is what I read. So this was probably dates to 1925. This tree is enormous. I don't know, I'm just going to guess it's 100 feet across. It has, dozens, if not over 100 tree limbs going down into the ground. It's supported by a lot of tree limbs. And I took a close-up shot here because it has some berries on it when I was down there a couple years ago. And so that's a banyan tree with berries. Banyan trees grow in India. I think the largest one covers about 5 acres. I think that one is the largest tree in the world in terms of how much area it covers. Not in terms of, girth and size, how much stuff is there, but in terms of how much area it covers. I think there's one banyan tree in India covers about 5 acres, which blows my mind because I own about 5 acres. And I can't imagine one tree covering all that. Anyway, um, if you live in Florida, you go to Fort Myers, the Edison Museum down there. They have a big banyan tree out there, beautiful tree growing. Also, Edison and Henry Ford were neighbors down there during the winter time, and they're trying to figure out ways to grow different kinds of rubber easily. So rubber for tires could be manufactured a lot more cheaply. Anyway, there's a big banyan tree down there as well. All right, so anyway, and yeah, the St. Petersburg Chess Club's still there after all these years. Okay, then, so did I read all that? Yeah, I think I did. Okay, so that just seemed to be a good picture to have in the background today. Now, explain something here. The word kinds is used in Genesis to divide both plants and animals into categories that can only reproduce within their own kind. For example, it is possible that God loaded a male and female coyote onto Noah's Ark as the only members of the dog kind to survive the flood. So maybe the first two dogs were coyotes. We don't know. We weren't there. Maybe they're wolves. Maybe they're basset hounds, but probably not basset hounds. That probably came along much later. Okay. I love basset hounds. All right. So just two dogs would have sufficient genetic material that over time, between environmental adaptation, not evolution, environmental adaptation, and crossbreeding, can result in all the many dog breeds we enjoy today. So you can produce that in a couple thousand years, all these dog breeds. There's a lot of variety in there. Now, like animals, plants also have DNA, and DNA it's a highly complex. They're highly complex molecules which contain computer-like instructions directing the manufacture of various organic chemicals to maintain life and to direct the manufacturing of the various structures of the plant, including roots, bark, stems, trunks, or limbs, not to mention leaves, flowers, berries, fruit, and so forth. Okay, so there's a lot to plants when you think about it. Look at all the different parts of plants. Not as complicated as animals, I don't think, but a lot of complication there, a lot of different structures. And when I say computer-like instructions, DNA is made of 4 acids. That's it, 4 acids. And it appears in a strand that's wound in a helix, a spiral form. For humans, that strand is about 3.5 billion chemicals long. Our DNA is about 3.5 billion chemical molecules long. Uh, Incredible. In mathematics, we say that forms a word. You know, a word in mathematics is just an arrangement of letters. It has nothing to do with a dictionary. And so I don't know what it is in plants. Probably long enough. Um, it now in the I'm guessing the 1830s. I might be off by a little bit. Actually, it was a woman mathematician, Ada Lovelace. She was the daughter of Lord Byron, who was a very famous British poet who helped to create the Romantic era in poetry, perhaps other literature. I'm not sure. Anyway, Ada Lovelace was a very accomplished mathematician in her day. That was a day when people didn't appreciate women mathematicians. But she was friends with Charles Babbage, who created the first mechanical computers called difference engines. So Babbage created a contraption with all kinds of gears and stuff that could do things, could actually compute. And it didn't go very far because to produce a big one would have just been way too costly, and the world at that time really didn't understand that stuff. But Ada Lovelace was friends with him, and she figured out how a string, we'll say ones and zeros, you know, in modern terminology, could create a code that would encode and instruct the machine to do certain operations. Okay, that's called binary code. Well, all our computers are based upon off and on switches, binary codes like that. Now, going back to DNA, when you're wondering why I'm talking about computers, DNA is not two different chemicals, but it's four. So a DNA is a very long molecule, of course, of atoms. Of course, it's very tiny to see under a microscope, but of up to billions of different chemicals, and they're arranged just like Ada Lovelace's strip of paper in a way that they create a computer-like code with instructions. Wow. Now, I would guess there are very few computer scientists who would begin to understand the how computer code could work with four acids or four letters instead of two. Yeah, we're used to binary two. Four, that really ups the game. So, and there are probably a few that have kind of sorted that and figured that out. But anyway, it's basically it's computer programming in biological form. Was what DNA is. Okay, amazing. Okay, so God had to figure all this out. All right, and could he have done it differently? Yeah, yeah. God is God. He can do what he wants. But amazing, that the mind of God is way beyond any comprehension. And to believe that all this came about through random evolution, mutation, natural selection is, to me, it's I don't want to criticize it too hard because at one point I thought maybe it was possible. I think I pretty much always believed God created everything, and not evolution. But I can understand how people have learned this. They've been told this all their lives, and they believe it. And so there it is. Now, mainstream science assumes that life originated about 3 billion years ago on Earth through random chemical processes. Okay, now there was a famous experiment in 1952 where Miller and Urey, I believe are their names, were put some chemicals in a test tube and heated it up, or maybe they passed electricity through it. And when they looked at it, they found some amino acids, a couple of amino acids. Now, amino acids are one of the basic building blocks of life. That it's an organic chemical. It's a chemical of life. And that happened in 1952, and no one's ever done it in any other different way since then. And nowadays, it's believed that there might have been a little bit of contamination in that test tube that they didn't see. So maybe they actually did not create amino acids by getting a lucky mix of chemicals that maybe was contaminated. All right, I'm sure there's some lively discussions going on about that in that part of the science world. Um, anyway, chemists have yet to produce any organic chemicals or chemical life beyond several amino acids that actually do not appear in living matter. So what Miller and Urey made in 1952, kind of luckily made amino acids that don't appear in any living matter. It's a different type of amino acids. And I guess it's kind of complicated. I'm not very good at chemistry, but there are left molecules and right molecules and all kinds of interesting stuff. I'll tell you what, if you're really into chemistry and you want to understand the origin of life arguments um, from a certain viewpoint, look up James Tour. He is one of the great living chemists in this world. People acknowledge that. James Tour is phenomenal. I believe he teaches at the University of Texas, but don't in Houston, but don't hold me. No, University of Houston, or maybe it's at Rice University. I don't know. Somewhere in Texas, I think, is where he's at. Great Christian, and his videos are a little technical. I have a little hard time following it sometimes, but he will tell you in no uncertain ways why nothing's working. They're not going to be able to create life in a test tube in the laboratory. And I'll do a video about it someday. I'll try to break it down kind of more simply so I can understand it. Okay. But anyway, we can't create life, and there's really um, no thought that we ever could because the way things decay, and that's a long story. So we'll leave it for another day. Unless you look up James Tour, he'll explain it. Okay. Now, Charles Darwin gets the most credit for originating the theory of evolution through natural selection, which is a theory which credits nature in making decisions. Nature creates mutations when animals, or I guess plants, reproduce. There are mutations that benefit life, leading to many millions of plant and animal species that evolved over millions of years. That's the theory of evolution, according to Darwin. Now, oh boy, we'll do some videos on evolution someday. There are actually mutations inevitably lead to a degradation, not an improvement in the computer code, and that's been a mathematician looked at that very closely, and it's just like, oh, can never really happen. All right, so long story. I won't get into it. We got enough to talk about. Okay, but someday we'll talk about evolution. All right, now evolution is taught as fact. It is, isn't it? The textbooks, Wikipedia, almost anything on the media, on the internet, in textbooks, assume it's fact because they have no other theory. They refuse to believe that God created everything, and they want scientists. Um, I have a friend who said, "Why is it that intellectuals um, want to gain credit for figuring everything out? To come up with their theories and show that they understand everything. Yeah, intellectuals. I think it's a trap because everybody wants to get famous for making discoveries in that world. I don't say everybody, but many of them want to get famous for making original discoveries, and so evolution is one of them. Darwin got very famous. He's revered. Um, and yet nothing he really came up with is panning out. Okay, evolution is taught as fact. It's a human, man-made understanding, not well. Let's see what God had to say in the Bible. All right. Um, Yet these forms of natural selection have never been observed. I don't care what they say. Natural selection has never been observed in both living live organisms or in the fossil record. So we've never seen that. What we've seen, and here I talk about in the next slide, what has been observed is adaptation. Now, adaptation are tiny changes based upon, we'll say, environmental um, factors. Could be just, different people, or humans, or different animals, or different plants crossbreeding, and there's some kind of change. In recent years, the science of genetics is beginning to understand. Oh, I hope I got this right, but I think I saw this. I need to track it down. In recent years, the science of genetics is beginning to understand how DNA does allow a provision for a species to adapt to its environment. But in no instance does one kind of plant or animal evolve into a separate kind of plant or animal through the process of adaptation. So we don't see that. We don't see one animal adapt into a different form where it can now breed with something outside of its own kind. That's why uh, dogs can't produce cats. Okay, dogs don't mate with cats. They just want to kill each other mostly. Um, and so yeah, it's just it doesn't happen. So it's never been observed. But adaptation, that's a real fact. And it's a very interesting fact. I want to do a video someday on genetics, and I need to come up to a little better speed on that. But explain a lot of things, including why we have racial diversity, how that happened after the Tower of Babel incident in the Bible, how that happened so quickly. I think there's a good mathematical explanation there through genetics. But I want to make sure I know what I'm talking about. Okay. So here's my question. What came first, plants or animals? Did you figure that out? Okay. Well, it has to be plants. All right. In the secular view, if animals appeared first, they would have quickly died out with nothing to eat because evolution takes millions of years to effect major changes. So yeah, we plants had to, in their view, plants had to appear first because suppose if animals appeared and animals, what do they feed off? Well, I don't know, maybe bacteria, single cell organisms feed off of chemicals. But at some point, if it goes to multicellular or starts turning into what we would really think of as an animal, um, that if there's no plants, it can only eat other animals. Okay, at some point, animals can only eat other animals, which means they're going to wipe themselves out. All right, there's not enough animals that they can just keep going. Eventually, they all die out. And so plants have to come first because plants don't eat plants. They simply use sunlight and water to grow and propagate. So it makes sense that plants had to appear first, even in the Genesis account, in order to feed the animals. Yeah. So God had a natural sequence there. Would Moses have thought of this if he was just making this up as a fiction? No, probably not. So yeah, we need animals, plants first, and so do the evolutionists teach us that plants had to evolve first? I don't know. I would hope so. But anyway, um, what is it about plants? Well, plants contain a lot of chlorophyll, the green stuff that converts sunlight into useful energy. Now, if plants appeared first through spontaneous chemical interactions, through the secular worldview, how could they begin to evolve into animals? Yeah, how do you do that? It would seem that both plants and animals would need to spontaneously appear in separate, highly problematic events. Animals simply don't have chlorophyll. Look, we can't create anything resembling life. We can't even create the atoms, the molecules of life in the lab of that has appeared in life. We have been unable, for very good reasons, according to Dr. Tour, we haven't been able to create this stuff in test tubes, and much less put it together and make some kind of living organism. It's really not ever going to happen. And so now we're trying to convince me that, well, just random chemicals mixing out there is going to produce plants and animals. They have to show up about the same time, at least plants first, so that the animals could eat. And they have to spontaneously appear in separate, highly problematic events. Because animals simply don't have chlorophyll. Plants, how does a plant evolve into an animal? Okay, it has to get rid of its chlorophyll. It means it dies. And I mean, it just makes absolutely no sense. And that animals could evolve from any kind of plant material. All right. Okay. Am I crazy or what? Isn't that obvious? I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. And I'm not saying that they're claiming that out there. Don't misquote me. Look, I will grant that the scientists who believe in the secular mainstream view, these people are very smart people. I would say probably they're all smarter than I am, especially about science, because I'm not a scientist. I'm a mathematician, and so I don't want to be too critical of these people. But I don't. I would only criticize that they're not, maybe in some cases, not being very objective about what they're looking at or logical. I'll just leave it at that. Anyway, okay, so it was mentioned, sorry, I should be mentioned, in my day 2 video that God created water to have surface tension. That's that little thin layer on top of water that we really don't see, but surface tension allows the bugs to not get drowned when they get rained on or end up in a lake, um, and other things. This surface tension allows for water to rise in plants through capillary action. All right, um, so let's say this. Without the physics of surface tension in water and the physics of capillary action, plants could not exist in the form we know. We couldn't have trees. We couldn't have corn. We couldn't have anything like that. They could not exist in the form we know unless, in form we know of, not if. Sorry, I did proofread this, but a couple things fell through the cracks here. Plants could not exist in the form we know of unless they only existed in shallow waters, perhaps. I guess a plant could live in shallow waters. It could get sunlight. It would have all the water it needed. It could probably thrive in that, but you're not going to get trees or farm plants that we can eat, or flowers and all, grass and weeds and all the other stuff that are out there. All right, so now we look at creation through the lens of the book of Genesis. And again, the book of Genesis, this is it's a theory about creation. It's historical science, I guess you might say. So we can't prove it. We can't prove it. And so it is a theory, but let's see how the evidence stacks up. So if you look at the creation through the lens of the book of Genesis, we can see that God planned ahead on all his creation. Yeah, he planned all this ahead. It had to follow pretty much a certain sequence of events. Let there be light meant there was matter. There was ways for chemicals to develop. There's all kinds of stuff going on. In part, he was setting up the earth to support animal and human life. Yeah. And then I like to throw this in. As a bonus, he gave us a tremendous variety in plant foods, pretty plants and flowers, trees, useful for lumber and shade, and on and on and on. And so we can try to wax eloquent about all the great things in plants. And the variety, the variety is just uncountable in plants. Look at that banyan tree that I'm sitting under. Okay, virtually sitting under. Wow, it doesn't look like an oak tree or a maple tree that I see out in the window of my cabin. So totally different. And look at those pretty berries. I don't know if you can eat those, if they're edible at all. I have no idea. Not everything out there is edible, of course. But anyway, now in the stark, and now I'm kind of dramatizing this, in the stark, pitiless lens of the evolutionary worldview. And actually, Professor Richard Dawkins used a quote with the universe having pitiless indifference to us in the evolutionary worldview. So I'm not making this totally up. In the stark, pitiless lens of the evolutionary worldview, it would seem that a few highly successful plants or weeds maybe, would just totally dominate the earth and choke out further tentative steps toward evolution of more plants. Yeah, I think it would just dominate. And prettiness of flowers would serve absolutely no purpose. I just threw that in as a freebie. Yeah, why have pretty flowers? What good does that do? The insects. I didn't mention in this video that God created these plants, but he had to create at some point insects in order to pollinate these plants. I don't know what day he created insects on. That he didn't go into those details, but we needed insects to pollinate the plants so that they could grow and grow fruits and vegetables and berries and all that good stuff. But yeah, I'm kind of thinking more mathematically. If there are only a very few species at the beginning of creation, and one of them is incredibly successful, it's going to start growing like crazy. I think it's likely to choke out just about anything else. So you might have only a couple of different plants on Earth. Same with the animals. If an animal got big enough, it could eat anything else, would just dominate the whole food chain. That may be all we have is only a couple of different animals. Okay, so anyway, let's see. So God gave us tasty plants. We can eat some leaves, like lettuce and cabbage, and many fruits, berries, nuts, and vegetables. Oh yeah, gave us all this stuff, and nature didn't have to give this to us. God made sure that we got it all. And now, throw a few more things here. Plants also support animal life by converting carbon dioxide to oxygen. They help prevent the erosion of the land. They gave us fuel for heating and lumber, for building houses and other structures. God really was looking ahead when he created the plants. Yeah, absolutely. Now, in the biblical worldview, the hierarchy of life, I'll throw this in here. The hierarchy of life starts with the plants. The plants are the lowest form of life. And then next are the animals. And that's the order he created them, plants first and then animals. After that, well, actually, before all that was the angelic kingdom. And God created different forms of angels for all the purposes he desired. Angels serve God, but they also serve mankind. And that is believe that's why Lucifer got so mad. It's in the book of Isaiah, it talks about what Lucifer did, who was the prettiest angel out there, um, only one step below God in prettiness, they say. And he was a very high-ranking angel, and he got very resentful that God was creating humans, planning to create humans, and he rebelled. He rebelled to get that. He didn't want to serve humans. He wanted to be above humans. But angels serve God, but they also serve us. And not all angels have done that. There's been another, at least one other rebellion of angels that's detailed in Genesis chapter 6. The Watchers and created the Nephilim, and I can go on and on about that stuff. The Anyway, but by and large, and maybe a third of the angels is believed from the book of Revelation. Possibly a third of the angels rebelled along with Lucifer, and all of them got thrown out of heaven. So because it looks like God gave angels free will, just like He gave us free will. Free will is the most dangerous gift He gives us, and so angels get it also. But God created humans last on day 6. He created us in His image. And we'll talk more about what that means in the day 6 video, from what my understanding. So the only being above humans is Almighty God, the creator of all. And by the way, a little bit of evidence here. Every time in the Bible, when an angel appears to a human, sometimes those humans just like drop their knees and start worshiping the angel. And every time the angel says, "Don't do that. Only worship God. Don't do that." And so angels are very careful. Don't worship me. That's God. Um, but 2 or 3 times, what appeared may have been sort of an angel never said that, and it's believed that was in the Old Testament, early appearance of Jesus. Yeah, yeah, you can worship Jesus because He is God. He is part of God. Um, God in 3 parts, three persons, not 3 gods, one God, 3 persons. Very puzzling, the Trinity. Okay, I know it's unless you're really used to Christianity, it's kind of tough to take that one in. Okay. All right. Well, that's about what I can think of. I can think of a lot to say about plants, but I think I'll just end up being a little more repetitive. So I think I'm going to wrap it up here, and we'll go on to day 4. Hopefully, in a few days, I'll get that video out. And other than that, let's roll the credits, and I hope to see you again. Thanks for joining.